You should be grateful, Denise. Most people in your position would have been let go entirely. That's what Marcus Whitfield said to me. Standing in the middle of the break room at Greystone Retail Group's Atlanta headquarters, coffee machine gurgling behind him, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they always did on the fourth floor. He said it with a smile. The kind of smile that expects you to smile back. I didn't smile back. He was telling me, after 10 years, after building the most profitable district in the Southeast region from a string of underperforming stores nobody wanted to touch, that I was being demoted. Not transferred. Not restructured. Demoted. From store manager of the flagship Buckhead location to assistant manager. My assistant manager. Reporting to someone who had never managed so much as a lemonade stand. His son, Kyle Whitfield, 24 years old. Business degree from some mid-tier school in Florida where, from what I'd later learn, he'd barely scraped through with a 2.3 GPA. Kyle, who showed up to his first day wearing boat shoes and a polo with the collar popped like he was heading to a fraternity mixer, not running a $14.2 million annual revenue location. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. Let me tell you who I was before Marcus Whitfield decided I was disposable. My name is Denise Calloway. I'm 41 years old. I started at Greystone Retail Group when I was 31, fresh off a brutal divorce that left me with a 7-year-old daughter, a leased Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, and exactly $1,340 in my checking account. I didn't walk into Greystone with a plan to climb the ladder. I walked in because they were hiring and I needed to feed my kid. I started on the sales floor. Register 3, Housewares Department. Minimum wage plus a commission structure so thin you could see through it. But I showed up. Every shift, 15 minutes early. I learned the inventory system in 2 weeks, a system most employees took 3 months to figure out. Within 6 months, I was training new hires. Within a year, I was shift lead. By year 3, I was assistant manager at the Midtown location, and by year 5, I was handed the keys to the Buckhead flagship. That store was a mess when I got it. Turnover rate of 74%. Shrinkage at 4.1%, nearly double the company average. Customer satisfaction scores hovering around 62 out of 100. The previous manager had been fired for falsifying inventory reports, and the staff that remained were demoralized, undertrained, and one bad quarter away from mass resignation. I rebuilt it. Not with some flashy corporate playbook or a consultant's PowerPoint. I rebuilt it by learning every single person's name on that floor. All 43 of them. I learned their schedules, their strengths, their kids' names. I restructured the shift rotations so single parents could pick up their children on time. I implemented a peer mentorship program that reduced new hire turnover by 38% in the first year. I personally renegotiated vendor delivery windows to reduce backroom congestion, which cut restocking time by 22 minutes per cycle. By year 7, the Buckhead store had the lowest shrinkage rate in the entire Southeast District, 1.2%. Customer satisfaction hit 91. Revenue climbed from $9.8 million to $14.2 million annually. We won Greystone's Store of the Year award twice. I have the plaques. They're still in a box in my garage. I gave that company everything. I missed my daughter Amara's 8th grade graduation because of a regional audit. I worked Thanksgiving 4 years in a row because I refused to ask my team to do something I wouldn't do myself. I skipped vacations. I answered calls at midnight when the alarm system tripped. I drove to the store during a thunderstorm in 2021 because a pipe burst in the stockroom and I didn't trust anyone else to handle the water damage protocol correctly. I was loyal. Stupidly, painfully loyal. And I trusted Marcus Whitfield because he was the one who promoted me. He was the regional director who looked at my numbers in year 3 and said, "Denise, you're exactly what this company needs more of." He shook my hand. He looked me in the eye. I believed him. So when he called me into his office on a Tuesday morning in March, not the Buckhead store, but the regional office on Peachtree Street, the one with the mahogany desk and the framed motivational posters that always felt like they were mocking you, I thought it was about the expansion. Greystone had been talking about opening 2 new locations in the metro area, and I'd submitted a proposal for managing the rollout. 14 pages. Detailed staffing projections, vendor partnerships, a phased opening timeline. I'd spent 3 weekends on it. Marcus was sitting behind his desk when I walked in. He wasn't alone. A young man sat in the chair to his left, slouched, legs crossed at the ankle, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I entered. "Denise, sit down," Marcus said. His voice was warm. It was always warm. That was the trap. I sat. "I want you to meet Kyle." "My son." Kyle glanced up from his phone long enough to give me a nod that barely qualified as acknowledgement. He had Marcus's jawline, but none of his polish. His handshake, when he finally offered it, was limp and brief. "Kyle just finished his degree," Marcus continued, beaming like he was introducing a Nobel laureate. "He's been shadowing operations at our Jacksonville location for the past few months, and I think he's ready for something bigger." My stomach tightened. I didn't know why yet. Instinct, maybe. The way Marcus was leaning forward. The way he wasn't quite meeting my eyes. "I'm placing Kyle as store manager at the Buckhead location." The words landed like a slap. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a flat, stinging impact that left my face hot and my hands cold. "And I'd like you to stay on as assistant manager, to help with the transition." There it was. 10 years. Exposed like a magic trick where the audience finally sees the wire. I wasn't being promoted. I wasn't being consulted. I was being hollowed out and handed back to myself in a smaller container. "Marcus," I said, and my voice was steady, which surprised me. "The Buckhead store is performing at the highest level in the district." "My team." "And that's exactly why Kyle needs to be there," he interrupted. "He needs to learn from the best operation we have. And who better to guide him than the person who built it? Guide him. Not lead alongside him. Not co-manage. Guide. Like a tour guide. Like a babysitter." I looked at Kyle. He was back on his phone. "What experience does Kyle have in store management?" I asked. I kept my tone professional. Measured. But inside, something was cracking. Marcus waved his hand. "He's got the education. He's got the drive. And he's got you. He's got me. Like I was a resource. A tool in the toolbox. A safety net for his son's incompetence." I wanted to say no. I wanted to stand up, tell Marcus exactly what I thought of his nepotism wrapped in corporate language, and walk out. But I had a mortgage. I had Amara's braces to pay off. I had a car payment and a credit card balance from when the furnace died in January. I couldn't afford righteous indignation. Not yet. So I nodded. I said, "I understand." And I walked out of that office with my dignity folded up and tucked somewhere deep where I wouldn't have to look at it. Kyle started the following Monday. He arrived 40 minutes late. No apology. No explanation. Just strolled in with a Starbucks cup and a grin, like the store had been waiting for him to grace it with his presence. I was already on the floor. I'd been there since 6:15 a.m., prepping for a vendor delivery that required specific temperature-controlled staging for a new line of perishable home goods Greystone was piloting. It was a $340,000 initial order. I'd coordinated the logistics personally over 3 weeks. Kyle walked past the staging area without a glance. He went straight to the manager's office, my office, until 5 days ago, closed the door, and didn't come out for 2 hours. When he finally emerged, he found me in the stockroom reconciling the delivery manifest. "Hey, Denise," he said, leaning against the door frame like he owned the building. Which, in a way, his father had made sure he did. "So, I've been looking at the schedule, and I think we need to shake things up." "Shake things up how?" "The floor coverage is too heavy on weekday mornings. I want to shift bodies to evenings and weekends. That's when the real traffic is." I stared at him. "Kyle, our weekday morning traffic accounts for 41% of weekly revenue. That's when our corporate clients come in. The design firms, the office managers placing bulk orders. If we thin the floor during those hours." "I hear you," he said, in a tone that made it clear he didn't. "But I've got a different vision for this store. Fresh eyes, you know. Fresh eyes." That phrase would become his shield for every bad decision he made over the next 4 months. Fresh eyes when he canceled the vendor discount program I'd negotiated, costing us $28,000 in annual savings. Fresh eyes when he redesigned the floor layout based on aesthetic flow instead of traffic pattern data, which dropped impulse purchase rates by 19%. Fresh eyes when he scheduled himself off every Saturday, the busiest day of the week, because, and I quote, "leaders need to recharge." And through all of it, I was expected to clean up, to cover, to train him without ever being allowed to correct him. Because every time I raised a concern, every time I brought data to support a different approach, Kyle would smile that empty smile and say, "I appreciate the input, Denise, but I've got this." He didn't have it. He didn't have anything close to it. But he had something I didn't, a last name that matched the regional directors. The staff noticed. Of course they noticed. Tanya Williams, my best floor supervisor, pulled me aside one afternoon in the break room. She'd been with me for 6 years. She was the one who stayed late during the pipe burst. She was the one who cried when we won Store of the Year the second time. "Denise," she said quietly, glancing at the door. "How long are we supposed to pretend this is okay?" I didn't have an answer. I just shook my head and told her to hang in there. But even as I said it, I could feel the lie in my own mouth. Hang in there for what? For Kyle to learn? He wasn't learning. He was coasting. And I was the engine he was coasting on. The worst part wasn't the demotion. It wasn't the pay cut, $12,000 less annually, which I felt every single month. It wasn't even watching Kyle take credit for initiatives I'd built years before he arrived. The worst part was the meeting. The one in April, 6 weeks after Kyle started. Regional leadership flew in for a quarterly review. Marcus was there, of course. So were 2 other district directors and the VP of Southeast Operations, a woman named Patricia Odom, who I'd always respected. Kyle presented the quarterly numbers. My numbers. The revenue, the customer scores, the shrinkage rates, all metrics from systems and processes I had personally designed and maintained. He stood at the front of the conference room with a slide deck that someone in marketing had polished for him, and he talked about my vision for the Buckhead store and the culture I'm building here. I sat in the back row. Assistant managers don't present at quarterly reviews. At one point, Patricia asked about the vendor delivery optimization that had saved the store $47,000 the previous year. Kyle paused. I could see it, the blankness behind his eyes, the half-second of panic before the mask slid back into place. "That was a team effort," he said smoothly. "Something we've been refining over time." Like he'd been there. Like he'd spent 3 months analyzing delivery windows and renegotiating contracts with suppliers who didn't want to budge. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Something colder. Something more permanent. It was the moment my loyalty died. Not cracked. Not bent. Died. Quietly, completely, like a light switching off in a room no one was watching. And I realized, sitting in that back row while a 24-year-old with a limp handshake presented my life's work as his own, that I wasn't going to hang in there. I wasn't going to wait for things to get better. I was going to wait for the right moment. Because I knew something Kyle didn't. I knew something Marcus didn't. I knew every system in that store, every vendor relationship, every inventory protocol, every seasonal ordering pattern, every emergency procedure. Every workaround for the ancient POS system that crashed if you ran more than 6 concurrent transactions. I knew which suppliers would extend credit and which ones would pull product at the first late payment. I knew that the HVAC system on the second floor had a compressor that failed every August and needed to be manually cycled, or the entire perishable goods section would spoil within 4 hours. I was the institutional memory of that store, and they had just told me I wasn't valuable enough to lead it. If you're feeling this story, if you've ever sat in that back row watching someone else wear your crown, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me, because what happens next is the moment everything falls apart, and I promise you, it's not Kyle's store that breaks first. It's the lie holding it all together. The weeks after that quarterly meeting blurred together in a way that felt like drowning in slow motion. Not the dramatic kind where you thrash and scream. The quiet kind. Where the water rises an inch at a time and you keep telling yourself it's fine, you can still breathe, you've handled worse. I couldn't sleep. Not properly. I'd lie in bed at 11:30, staring at the ceiling fan making its lazy rotations, and my brain would replay Kyle's voice saying the culture I'm building here on a loop. Some nights I'd get up at 2 a.m. and sit at the kitchen table with a glass of water, just sitting, not thinking about anything productive, just letting the silence press against me like a weight I couldn't name. Amara noticed. She was 17 by then, sharp in the way teenagers are when they're paying attention, but pretending not to. One morning, she came downstairs while I was making her lunch. Turkey sandwich, no tomato, extra mustard, same as always, and she just stood in the doorway watching me. Mom, you okay? I'm fine, baby. You've been making that sandwich for like 10 minutes. I looked down. She was right. I'd been spreading mustard on the same slice of bread over and over, lost somewhere inside my own head. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Too thin. Too sharp. Amara didn't push it. She just walked over, took the knife from my hand, and finished making her own lunch. She kissed me on the cheek before she left for school, and I stood in that kitchen for another 5 minutes, holding a butter knife, trying to remember what it felt like to be good at something. That's the part nobody tells you about workplace humiliation. It doesn't stay at work. It follows you home. It sits at your dinner table. It crawls into bed with you. It makes you question not just your job, but your judgment, your worth, your entire sense of who you are. I had built my identity around being competent, reliable, the person who could fix anything. And now I was watching a kid dismantle everything I'd built while I held the door open for him. May came in hot. Atlanta in May is already thick with humidity, the kind that makes your clothes stick to you before you even reach the parking lot. But inside the Buckhead store, things were heating up in a different way. Kyle had decided with his fresh eyes that the store needed a complete inventory overhaul. Not a standard cycle count. Not a targeted audit. A full physical inventory of every SKU in the building. All 47,000 of them. In the middle of our busiest sales quarter. I tried to stop it. I went to his office, my old office, with my old desk, where I could still see the faint outline on the wall where my Store of the Year plaques used to hang, and I laid it out as clearly as I could. Kyle, a full physical inventory during Q2 is going to pull at least 12 floor associates off the sales floor for a minimum of 6 days. That's roughly $83,000 in projected lost sales based on last year's Q2 daily averages. And if we miscount even one section, the system discrepancies will cascade into our automated reorder triggers. We could end up with $200,000 in overstock or, worse, critical shortages on our top sellers right before the summer push. He was leaning back in the chair, my chair, with his feet propped on the edge of the desk. He had a pen in his hand that he kept clicking. Click, 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 like a metronome counting down to disaster. Denise, he said, and the way he said my name made my skin prickle. Not hostile. Worse. Patronizing. I get that you're used to doing things a certain way, but the inventory system is outdated. We need a clean baseline. My dad agrees. My dad agrees. For words that ended every argument before it started. The nuclear option of nepotism. What was I supposed to say? Your dad is wrong too? Your dad promoted you because you're his son, not because you're qualified? Your dad is the reason this store is about to implode? I said none of those things. I said I'd recommend at least waiting until after the Memorial Day weekend rush. That gives us. Already scheduled it for next week, he said. Click, click, click. I need you to coordinate the count teams. He needed me to coordinate it. Of course he did. Because he didn't know how. He didn't know that a physical inventory at Greystone required pre-count zone mapping, that you had to freeze the PS system's auto-replenishment module during the count window, that the warehouse team needed 72 hours notice to hold inbound shipments. He didn't know any of it because he'd never done it. He'd never done anything. But I did it. I coordinated the teams. I built the zone maps. I prepped the count sheets. I did everything except the one thing that mattered. I didn't override his timeline. I didn't go above his head to Marcus. I didn't sabotage it or slow walk it. I let it happen exactly the way Kyle wanted it to happen. And I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't strategic. Not yet. It was exhaustion. Pure, bone-deep exhaustion. I was tired of fighting for a store that had been taken from me, tired of protecting someone who didn't respect me, tired of being the invisible scaffolding holding up a building that had my name scraped off the front. So I followed his orders. To the letter. No more, no less. For the first time in 10 years, I did exactly what I was told and nothing extra. The inventory started on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, it was already falling apart. Kyle had ignored my recommendation to freeze the auto-replenishment system. He said it was unnecessary and that the system would self-correct. It didn't self-correct. What happened was that while the count teams were physically tallying stock in the warehouse, the PS system was simultaneously processing sales on the floor and triggering automatic reorders based on the declining shelf quantities. The system thought we were selling through product at an unprecedented rate. In reality, we were just moving boxes from shelves to count pallets and back again. By Thursday morning, $412,000 in duplicate orders had been placed with 14 different vendors. Automatic. Irreversible under Greystone's vendor contract terms, which included a 15% restocking fee for canceled orders within the fulfillment window. I found out when Tanya came to me, not Kyle. She was standing by the loading dock with a clipboard, face gray. Denise, we've got 7 trucks scheduled for delivery tomorrow that nobody ordered. Well, the system ordered them. But nobody human ordered them. I pulled up the procurement dashboard on the dock terminal. The numbers made my stomach drop. Duplicate shipments across housewares, seasonal, electronics accessories, and this was the one that really hurt, the entire perishable home goods pilot line. $87,000 worth of temperature-sensitive product that had a 14-day shelf life, now arriving in quantities we couldn't sell in 14 weeks. Does Kyle know? I asked. Tanya gave me a look. The kind of look that contains an entire conversation. Kyle left at 3 o'clock yesterday. Said he had a networking dinner. Of course he did. I stood at that loading dock for a long time. The afternoon sun was brutal, bouncing off the concrete, and I could feel sweat running down my back. Tanya waited beside me, not saying anything, just being there the way she always was. And I had a choice. I could fix it. I could call the vendors, negotiate holds, reroute shipments, manually override the replenishment triggers, and spend the next 48 hours stitching the wound closed the way I'd done 100 times before. I could save Kyle's job. Again. Or I could let the wound bleed. I'm not proud of what I felt in that moment. It wasn't righteous. It wasn't clean. It was dark and petty and human. I wanted him to fail. I wanted Marcus to see what his son had done. I wanted Patricia Odom and the entire regional leadership team to watch the Buckhead flagship choke on $412,000 worth of product it couldn't move, and I wanted every single one of them to know that I had warned him. But then I looked at Tanya. At the dock workers behind her. At the team inside the store who had nothing to do with Kyle's incompetence and everything to lose if the store's numbers tanked. These were people with rent and car payments and kids in daycare. My people. The ones I'd hired, trained, mentored. So I made calls. I spent that entire night on the phone. I got 3 vendors to agree to partial holds. I rerouted 2 shipments to the Marietta location, which had the warehouse space. I manually froze the replenishment module at 11:47 p.m. from my laptop at home, using admin credentials that Kyle didn't even know existed because he'd never bothered to ask about the backend systems. I saved roughly $260,000 of the $412,000 in unnecessary orders. The remaining $152,000 hit the store's books like a freight train. Kyle's response, when he finally showed up Friday morning and saw the damage report I'd left on his desk, was to call me into the office and ask, with genuine confusion on his face, why didn't the system catch this? I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not with anger. With something closer to pity, which was somehow worse. I told you to freeze the auto-replenishment before the count, I said quietly. On Tuesday. In this office. He blinked. I don't remember that. I sent you a follow-up email. Timestamped 4:12 p.m. Tuesday. He shifted in the chair. Well, the system should have safeguards for this kind of thing. It does, I said. I'm the safeguard. And you overrode my recommendation. Something flickered across his face. Not remorse. Not understanding. Fear. The quick, animal kind that comes when you realize you're in over your head and the water is still rising. But it vanished just as fast, replaced by that smooth, empty confidence his father had gifted him along with the job title. "Let's not point fingers," he said. "Let's focus on solutions going forward." Solutions going forward. I almost laughed. Almost. I didn't report the incident to Marcus. I didn't have to. The $152,000 loss showed up in the monthly P&L, and when Marcus called Kyle to discuss it, Kyle told him it was a system glitch. Marcus believed him. Or chose to. The distinction didn't matter anymore. But something had shifted in me. That night, after the calls, after the damage control, after I'd saved $250,000 for a store that wasn't mine anymore, I sat in my car in the Greystone parking lot at 1 a.m. and cried. Not delicate, dignified tears. Ugly crying. The kind where your whole face contorts and you can't breathe and snot runs down your lip and you don't care because nobody's watching. I cried for 10 minutes straight, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in my life. And when I was done, I wiped my face with a Wendy's napkin from the glove compartment, and I started thinking clearly for the first time in months. I wasn't going to quit quietly. I wasn't going to file a complaint that would get buried in HR's filing cabinet. I wasn't going to let Marcus Whitfield and his underqualified son rewrite the story of what I built. I started documenting everything. Not casually, methodically. Every decision Kyle made that I'd advised against, with dates, email timestamps, and projected consequences. Every time he left early. Every time he failed to follow protocol. Every vendor relationship he damaged. Every staff complaint that went unaddressed. I kept it all in a personal drive, encrypted, backed up twice. But more importantly, I started cataloging what I knew. The institutional knowledge that lived only in my head. The things no manual covered because I was the manual. I knew that Greystone's entire Southeast logistics chain depended on a relationship with a freight coordinator named Darnell Price at Trans-South Shipping. Darnell and I had worked together for 8 years. He gave us priority routing during peak seasons, not because of a contract, but because I'd helped his daughter get a summer job at the store in 2019, and he never forgot it. Without Darnell's goodwill, our shipping costs would increase by roughly $34,000 annually, and our delivery windows would slip by 2 to 3 days. I knew that the Buckhead store's HVAC system had a compressor on the second floor, Unit 7B, that failed every August without exception. The manufacturer had discontinued the part. I kept 2 spares in a locked cabinet in the maintenance closet, and I was the only person who knew they were there. Without those parts, the second floor would hit 90 degrees within 6 hours, and every perishable product in the pilot section would be destroyed. I knew that the PS system crashed if you ran more than 6 concurrent transactions during a promotional event, and that the workaround, a manual batch processing sequence I developed with the IT team in 2020, existed only in my head and in a personal notebook I kept in my bag. The IT team that helped me build it had since been outsourced to a third-party vendor in Phoenix who had no record of the fix. I knew that our top 3 corporate clients, Hargrove Design Studio, Peachtree Office Solutions, and a boutique hotel chain called the Linden Group, had all been personally cultivated by me over years of relationship building. Their combined annual spend was $1.3 million. They didn't buy from Greystone. They bought from Denise. All of this lived in me. Not in a system. Not in a training binder. In me. And for 10 years, I had given it freely, without leverage, without conditions, because I believed the company valued me. Now I understood the truth. They didn't value me. They valued what I produced. And the moment they thought someone else could produce it, even someone laughably unqualified, they threw me aside like a used coffee filter. June was when the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Kyle started bringing friends into the store. Not as customers. As employees. He hired 3 of his college buddies in the span of 2 weeks, Jake, Connor, and a guy everyone called Duff, whose real name I never learned. None of them had retail experience. Jake was assigned to the electronics department and spent most of his shifts watching YouTube on the display laptops. Connor was put in charge of the stockroom and immediately lost track of an entire pallet of premium cookware, $23,000 worth, that turned up 3 weeks later behind a stack of Christmas inventory that shouldn't have been on the floor in June. Duff was the worst. Kyle made him a floor supervisor over Tanya. Tanya, who had 6 years of experience, who had trained half the current staff, who customers asked for by name. Tanya, who came to me after the announcement with red eyes and shaking hands and said, "Denise, I can't do this anymore. I've been here since the beginning. I helped you build this. And now I'm reporting to a guy who doesn't know the difference between a SKU and a barcode." I held her hands. They were cold. "I know," I said. "I know. What are we going to do?" And for the first time, I told someone the truth. Not the whole truth. Not the plan. Just the feeling underneath it. "We're going to let them see what this store looks like without us." She searched my face. I could see her processing it, the fear, the hope, the exhaustion. Then she nodded. Once. Firm. "Okay," she said. "Okay. If you've ever been the person holding everything together while someone else gets the credit and the corner office, if you've ever felt that slow burn of watching your work get stolen in real time, then you already know what's coming. But I promise you, you don't know the half of it. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because the moment I've been building toward, it's closer than you think. And when it hits like a freight train with a receipt. July 4th weekend. The single biggest sales event of the year for Greystone Retail. For days. Historically, the Buckhead store pulled between $780,000 and $920,000 during this window. I had personally managed every July 4th event for the past 5 years, and my playbook was a thing of precision, staffing grids timed to 15-minute intervals, pre-staged promotional displays, vendor-coordinated flash deals, a customer flow pattern I'd mapped using 3 years of foot traffic data. Carl didn't use the playbook. Carl didn't know the playbook existed. He scheduled the holiday weekend like a regular week. Standard staffing. No pre-stage displays. No vendor coordination. He didn't even order the promotional signage until 3 days before the event, which meant it arrived the morning of July 3rd, half of it printed with the wrong dates. I watched it unfold from the assistant manager's desk, which was really just a folding table in the back corner of the stockroom that Kyle had designated as my workspace. He'd moved me out of the shared office in June, saying he needed the space for strategic planning sessions with Duff and Connor. Strategic planning sessions that, based on the empty energy drink cans and gaming controller I found in the trash, looked a lot like PlayStation breaks. The morning of July 3rd, I arrived at 5:45 a.m. to find the store in chaos. The overnight team had received a shipment that nobody had scheduled dock space for. Pallets were blocking the fire exit. The promotional signage was wrong, and Kyle was nowhere to be found. He showed up at 10:15. By then, I'd already redirected the shipment, cleared the fire exit, and hand-corrected 18 promotional signs with a marker and a ruler. Not because anyone asked me to. Because customers were walking in and the store looked like a disaster zone, and I couldn't physically, constitutionally could not let people see Greystone like that. Even now. Even after everything. That's my flaw. I know it. I care too much about things that have stopped caring about me. The weekend was a bloodbath. Revenue came in at $614,000. That was $166,000 below the low end of our historical range and $306,000 below our best year. Customer complaints spiked to 47 over the 4-day period, more than we'd received in the entire previous quarter. 3 corporate clients called to express concerns about the store's direction. One of them was Hargrove Design Studio, our biggest account. The buyer, a woman named Celeste, called me directly on my personal cell. "Denise, what is happening over there?" I sent my assistant in for the quarterly order, and she said the store looked like a flea market. She couldn't find anyone to help her for 20 minutes. "I'm sorry, Celeste. We're going through some changes." "Changes?" She paused. "Denise, are you still running things?" The question hit me harder than it should have. "I'm still here," I said, which wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. "Well," Celeste said carefully, "if you ever aren't there, I'd appreciate a heads up. We've been with Greystone because of you. I want to make sure you know that. I thanked her. Hung up. Sat in my car in the parking lot. It was becoming my office, my therapy couch, my war room, and added the conversation to my documentation file. Because of you. 3 words that meant more than any plaque on a wall. August arrived like a slow-moving storm. The heat was unbearable, 97 degrees for 9 straight days, and inside the store, something I'd been dreading finally happened. Unit 7B failed. The second-floor HVAC compressor, right on schedule, just like every August. The temperature on the second floor started climbing at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. By noon, it was 84 degrees. By 2 p.m., it hit 91. The perishable home goods pilot section, the $340,000 line I'd personally on board, was on the second floor. Temperature-sensitive candles, artisanal food products, organic skincare. All of it required climate-controlled conditions per the vendor agreements. All of it was now slowly melting, softening, and spoiling in the August heat. Kyle's response was to call the building maintenance contractor. The contractor came out, looked at the unit, and told Kyle what I already knew. The part was discontinued. Lead time for a compatible replacement was 3 to 4 weeks. Kyle called Marcus. Marcus called the HVAC company. The HVAC company confirmed 3 to 4 weeks. Minimum. Nobody called me. Nobody asked if I had a solution. Because nobody knew about the 2 spare compressor units I'd stockpiled in the maintenance closet 3 years ago, purchased with discretionary budget funds that I'd saved by negotiating better rates on cleaning supplies. I knew they were there. I could have walked to that closet, pulled out the part, and had the system running in 2 hours. I'd done it before. Twice. I didn't. I sat at my folding table in the stockroom and listened to the panic escalate through the walls. Kyle's voice, high and tight, on the phone with vendors trying to explain why their product was being stored at 91 degrees. Duff wandering the second floor with a box fan, like that was going to save $87,000 in perishable inventory. Connor suggesting they just open the windows, apparently unaware that the second floor didn't have windows that opened. By the end of the day, $87,400 in perishable product was unsalvageable. The vendor, a specialty distributor out of Savannah, pulled the entire pilot program from the Buckhead location. A program I had spent 4 months securing. Gone in 6 hours because the person running the store didn't know about a cabinet in a closet. And I felt it, the guilt. Hot and sharp, sitting right next to the satisfaction. I could have prevented it. I chose not to. Those 2 truths lived side by side in my chest, and neither one canceled the other out. I went home that night and couldn't eat dinner. Amara made pasta, and I just pushed it around the plate until she took it away without comment. Was I becoming the kind of person I'd always hated? The bitter employee who lets things burn out of spite? I lay awake asking myself that question, and I didn't like any of the answers I came up with. But then I thought about the quarterly meeting. Kyle's voice saying the culture I'm building here. Marcus's smile. Tanya's red eyes. The folding table. The $12,000 pay cut. The 10 years. And the guilt didn't disappear, but it got quieter. Quiet enough to live with. September brought the audit. Not a routine one, a triggered audit, initiated by Patricia Odom's office after the July 4th revenue shortfall and the perishable goods loss hit the regional dashboard. 2 auditors from corporate spent a week at the Buckhead store, and what they found was a portrait of mismanagement so thorough it almost looked intentional. Inventory discrepancies totaling $214,000. Unapproved hires, Jake, Connor, and Duff, processed without standard background checks or competency assessments. Vendor contracts lapsed or renegotiated at unfavorable terms. Safety protocol violations, including the fire exit incident from July, which had been documented by a customer who posted photos on social media. Staff turnover had spiked to 41% since Kyle's arrival, compared to 12% under my management. The auditors interviewed me. I answered every question honestly, completely, and with documentation. I didn't editorialize. I didn't need to. The numbers told the story better than I ever could. But here's what the audit didn't capture. It didn't capture the look on Tanya's face when Duff was promoted over her. It didn't capture the sound of my voice cracking when Celeste asked if I was still running things. It didn't capture the 2 spare compressor units sitting in a locked cabinet that could have saved $87,000 and a vendor relationship. It didn't capture the 10 years of my life that had been compressed into a folding table in a stockroom. Numbers tell you what happened. They don't tell you what it cost. The audit results went to Marcus. And Marcus, for the first time, couldn't spin it. Couldn't smile his way through it. Couldn't wave his hand and say Kyle just needs time. The numbers were too ugly, the losses too concrete, the pattern too clear. But instead of accountability, Marcus did what Marcus always did. He called me into his office on Peachtree Street and asked me to fix it. Denise, I need you to step up. Kyle's still learning, and the store needs your experience right now more than ever. I'm not asking you to take over, just to be more hands-on, more involved in the day-to-day decisions. I stared at him across that mahogany desk. The motivational poster behind his head said leadership is action, not position in bold serif font. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Marcus, I said slowly, you demoted me. You cut my pay by $12,000. You moved me to a folding table in the stockroom. And now you're asking me to do the job you took away from me, at the salary you cut, while your son keeps the title. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. For about 3 seconds. I understand your frustration. But this is about the team. The store. The bigger picture. The bigger picture. His bigger picture. The one where his son succeeds, and I'm the invisible engine making it happen. I'll think about it, I said. I didn't think about it. I'd already made my decision. I just wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. The moment was coming. I could feel it building like pressure behind a dam, every ignored warning, every stolen credit, every quiet humiliation adding weight to the water. And when that dam broke, I wasn't going to be the one standing downstream. I told Marcus I'd think about it. What I actually did was spend that weekend building a timeline. Not for him. Not for HR. For me. I printed every email, every timestamp, every P&L snapshot, every vendor complaint, every staffing change Kyle had made without proper authorization. I organized it chronologically in a binder, an actual physical binder with tab dividers, because I'm 41 years old and that's how I process things. Digital backups existed too, triple encrypted on a personal drive, but there was something grounding about holding the paper. Feeling the weight of it. 73 pages. That's what 10 months of mismanagement looked like when you laid it out end to end. 73 pages of decisions I'd warned against, losses I'd predicted, and a pattern of nepotism so blatant it would have been funny if it hadn't cost real people their livelihoods. But I wasn't planning to hand that binder to anyone at Greystone. Not Marcus. Not Patricia Odom. Not the auditors. Because I'd learned something fundamental about corporate hierarchies in the past 10 months. The system doesn't correct itself. It protects itself. Marcus would bury it. Patricia would escalate it through proper channels, which meant it would die in a committee. The auditors had already come and gone, and Kyle was still sitting in my chair. No. If this was going to matter, it had to go somewhere they couldn't control. The idea came to me on a Tuesday night in late September. I was scrolling through my phone in bed, doom scrolling, really, the way you do when your brain won't shut off, and I stumbled across a video. A woman in Chicago, a nurse, had gone live on social media after being fired for reporting unsafe staffing levels at her hospital. She was calm, specific, and devastating. She named names. She cited numbers. She showed documents. The video had 2.3 million views. The hospital launched an internal investigation within a week. I watched it 3 times. Then I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling. Could I do that? Me? Denise Calloway, who had never posted anything on social media more controversial than a photo of Amara's birthday cake. The woman who spent 10 years keeping her head down, doing her job, never making waves. The thought terrified me. And that's how I knew it was the right thing to do. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Not impulsively, deliberately. I wrote a script. Not a rant. Not a tearful monologue. A structured, fact-based account of what had happened at the Buckhead Greystone location since March. Every claim backed by a document. Every number verified. I practiced it in my bathroom mirror at night after Amara went to sleep, timing myself, adjusting the pacing, cutting anything that sounded bitter or petty. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted clarity. I also called Celeste at Hargrove Design Studio. Not to recruit her as an ally, just to give her the heads up I'd promised. Celeste, I'm leaving Greystone. I wanted you to hear it from me. Silence on the line. Then, when? Soon. Denise. Her voice was careful. What are you going to do? Something I should have done months ago. She didn't ask for details. She just said, whatever it is, you've got my number. And for what it's worth, we're moving our account regardless. Already started the paperwork. That call gave me something I didn't know I needed. Permission. Not from Celeste specifically, but from the universe, or whatever you want to call it. Permission to stop protecting a company that had never protected me. I chose a Friday, October 11th. There was a reason for the date. It was the day of Greystone's Southeast Regional Showcase, an annual event where store managers presented their performance highlights to corporate leadership, key vendors, and a handful of media contacts who covered the retail industry. It was held at the Buckhead store. My store. The showcase I had hosted and organized for the past 4 years. This year, Kyle was presenting. Marcus had made sure of it. The showcase was supposed to be Kyle's coronation, the moment where the regional leadership saw his vision, validated by strong Q3 numbers that, thanks to my damage control, weren't quite as catastrophic as they should have been. I arrived at the store at 6 a.m. that morning, earlier than anyone. The showcase didn't start until 10 o'clock, but I needed the quiet. I walked the floor one last time, touched the end cap displays I designed, straightened a row of picture frames and housewares, muscle memory, the kind your hands do before your brain catches up. I stood in the spot where Register 3 used to be, back when I started. They'd remodeled that section years ago, but I could still feel the ghost of it under my feet. I wasn't sentimental. I was saying goodbye. By 9:30, the store was buzzing. Corporate had sent a team to set up a presentation area near the front entrance, a small stage, a projector, rows of chairs. Vendors milled around with name tags and coffee cups. I spotted Patricia Odom near the seasonal display, talking to someone from marketing. Marcus was by the stage, adjusting Kyle's tie like he was sending him off to prom. Kyle looked nervous. First time I'd ever seen that. His hands kept going to his pockets, then out again. He was holding index cards, actual index cards, and I caught him mouthing words to himself. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the folding table, the $12,000 pay cut, Tanya's red eyes, the compressor in the closet. The sorry evaporated. At 9:45, I walked to the employee break room. Tanya was there along with Ramon, a stock associate who'd been with me for 7 years, and 2 other long-timers, Keisha and Dev. They knew something was happening. I hadn't told them what exactly. Just that today was the day and that they should have their personal belongings in their cars before the showcase started. Denise, Tanya said quietly. Are you sure? No, I said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. She nodded. Then she hugged me. Quick, tight, fierce. Keisha squeezed my hand. Ramon just looked at me with those steady brown eyes and said, "We're right behind you." I set up my phone on a shelf in the stockroom at 9:55 a.m., propped it against a box of receipt paper, angled toward me, camera on. I opened Instagram Live, then Facebook Live. Then I linked both to a Twitter X post with the caption, 10 years at Greystone Retail. Here's what they don't want you to know. I took a breath. My hands were shaking. I could hear the murmur of the showcase crowd through the stockroom wall, the polite laughter, the clink of coffee cups. Kyle's muffled voice starting his presentation. Something about exciting new directions. I pressed go. My name is Denise Calloway. For 10 years, I was the store manager of the Greystone Retail flagship location in Buckhead, Atlanta. 7 months ago, I was demoted to assistant manager so that the regional director's 24-year-old son could take my job. I was told to train him. I was told to be grateful. This is what happened next. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke the way I'd practiced, measured, specific, relentless. I held up documents. I cited dates. I read email excerpts. I showed the P&L comparisons, my last full year versus Kyle's first 7 months. Revenue down 23%. Shrinkage up from 1.2% to 3.8%. Staff turnover from 12% to 41%. The $412,000 inventory disaster. The $87,400 perishable goods loss. The vendor who pulled their pilot program. The 3 unvetted hires. The safety violations. I named Marcus Whitfield. I named Kyle Whitfield. I explained, calmly and clearly, that the regional director had installed his unqualified son into a leadership position and then asked the person he demoted to cover for his son's failures. I want to be clear, I said, looking directly into the camera. I am not doing this because I'm angry. I'm doing this because for 10 months, I watched good people, hardworking, loyal people who gave years of their lives to this store, get pushed aside, demoralized, and ignored so that one man's son could play CEO. And nobody in this company's leadership did a single thing about it. Not because they didn't know. Because they didn't care. I talked for 22 minutes. I didn't check the viewer count. I didn't look at comments. I just talked. And somewhere around minute 15, I heard the stockroom door open behind me. It was Kyle. He was standing in the doorway, index cards still in his hand, face white as printer paper. Behind him, I could see Marcus, phone already pressed to his ear, jaw clenched so tight the tendons in his neck were visible. Kyle stared at the phone. At me. At the phone again. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. You're welcome to respond, I said, still on camera. I've only stated facts. If anything I've said is inaccurate, correct me. Right now. On camera. He didn't speak. He just stood there, frozen, like a deer that had wandered onto a highway and couldn't remember which direction was safe. Marcus pushed past him. Turn that off, he hissed. Turn it off right now or I will have security. Security can escort me out, I said calmly. I'm almost done. And I was. I looked back at the camera one final time. To every person who's ever been demoted so someone's nephew or son or golf buddy could have your job, to every person who's been told to be grateful for being disrespected, you are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And you deserve better than a company that treats loyalty like a disposable commodity. My name is Denise Calloway. I'm done being quiet. I ended the stream. Picked up my phone. Walked past Kyle, who still hadn't moved. Walked past Marcus, whose face had gone from white to a deep, mottled red. Walked through the stockroom door, down the hallway, past the showcase crowd, some of whom were already looking at their phones with wide eyes, and out the front entrance of the Buckhead Greystone for the last time. Tanya was waiting by my car. So were Ramon, Keisha, and Dev. All 4 of them had their bags. All 4 of them had resigned that morning, effective immediately. Tanya had emailed her resignation at 9:50 a.m., 10 minutes before my stream started. The others followed within minutes. You didn't have to do that, I said, and my voice cracked for the first time all day. Yeah, we did, Ramon said simply. We stood in that parking lot for a few minutes, not saying much. The October sun was warm on my face. Inside the store, I could hear raised voices, the showcase falling apart in real time. Someone was calling my name over the intercom, which struck me as absurd, like the building itself didn't know I'd already left. I drove home with the windows down. My phone was buzzing nonstop on the passenger seat. I didn't look at it. Not yet. I needed the drive. Needed the silence. Needed to feel the weight of what I'd just done settle into my bones before the world started reacting. When I finally checked, 3 hours later, sitting on my couch with Amara beside me eating leftover pasta, the numbers didn't feel real. The live stream had been viewed 847,000 times across platforms. By midnight, it crossed 2 million. Someone had clipped the moment Kyle walked in and my line about welcoming his response. That clip alone had 1.4 million views on X. The hashtag Greystone Exposed was trending in Atlanta, then regionally, then nationally. My phone had 312 unread messages, texts from former coworkers, DMs from strangers, 3 voicemails from journalists, 2 from lawyers, 1 from a woman in Dallas who said she'd been in the exact same situation at a different retail chain and had never told anyone. Amara was reading the comments over my shoulder. Mom, she said, voice quiet with something I couldn't quite identify. People are really listening. Yeah, I said. They are. Are you okay? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know yet, I said. And that was the most honest thing I'd said all day. The next 72 hours were chaos. Not the fun, triumphant kind. The messy, terrifying, stomach-churning kind. Greystone's corporate communications team issued a statement on Saturday calling my claims misleading and taken out of context. They didn't specify which claims. They didn't provide counter-evidence. It was the corporate equivalent of nah, and the internet ate them alive for it. On Sunday, a retail industry journalist named Priya Kapoor published a piece in Retail Dive titled "The Greystone Problem: When Nepotism Meets Accountability." She'd independently verified the P&L numbers I'd cited through a source inside the company. She'd also obtained the audit report from September. The article included a quote from an anonymous Greystone employee. Everyone knew. We just couldn't say it. Monday morning, Greystone stock dipped 4.2% at market open. Not catastrophic, but enough to make the board pay attention. By Tuesday, 3 more vendors had publicly paused their partnerships with the Buckhead location, citing concerns about operational leadership. Combined value, $1.1 million in annual contracts. Marcus Whitfield was placed on administrative leave on Wednesday. The announcement was buried in an internal memo that leaked within an hour. Kyle was reassigned to a training role at the corporate office, which everyone understood was a polite way of saying he'd been pulled from the store before he could do more damage. But here's the part that doesn't fit the neat revenge narrative. Here's the part one wrestle with. Marcus called me on Thursday night. Not from his office number. From his personal cell. I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen for 4 rings, watching his name pulse, and then I picked up because some part of me, the part that remembered him shaking my hand and saying I was exactly what the company needed, couldn't let it go to voicemail. Denise. His voice was different. Stripped of the warmth, the polish, the performance. What was left sounded old. Tired. I'm not calling to threaten you or ask you to take anything down. I waited. I just need you to know that I know I was wrong. About Kyle. About you. About all of it. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, and I didn't say anything for a long time. He's my son, Denise. He's my kid. I thought if I put him in the right environment, with the right people around him, he'd rise to it. I thought. His voice broke. Actually broke. I thought I was helping him. You weren't, I said. You were hurting everyone else to avoid telling your son the truth. Silence. And the truth is that he wasn't ready. Maybe you will be someday. But you didn't give him a chance to earn it. You just handed it to him and expected me to make it work. More silence. Then I know. That's not enough, Marcus. I know that too. We sat on the phone for another minute without speaking. I could hear him breathing. I could hear a television in the background, low and indistinct. He sounded like a man sitting alone in a room, which is probably exactly what he was. For what it's worth, he said finally, you are the best manager I ever worked with. I should have told you that more. I should have told you that instead of, he stopped. Instead of what I did. I didn't forgive him. I want to be clear about that. Forgiveness isn't something I owed him, and a phone call doesn't erase 10 months of humiliation. But I hurt him. And hearing him made the whole thing heavier, not lighter. Because it's easier to hate someone who's purely villainous. It's harder when you realize they're just a flawed person who made selfish choices and hurt people they didn't mean to hurt. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. The weeks that followed were a blur of interviews, legal consultations, and decisions I wasn't prepared to make. Greystone's legal team sent a cease and desist letter, which my attorney, a woman named Faye Drummond who I'd found through a friend of a friend and who charged me a rate I could barely afford, responded to with a 14-page rebuttal that essentially said, everything my client stated is factually accurate, and we welcome the discovery process if you'd like to pursue this further. They didn't pursue it further. Patricia Odom reached out to me personally in late October. She'd been promoted to interim regional director after Marcus's leave became permanent. She offered me my old position back. Full salary. Back pay for the demotion period. A formal apology from corporate. I turned it down. Not out of pride. Not out of spite. I turned it down because I'd spent 10 years giving everything to a place that only valued me when I was useful, and I couldn't unknow that. You can't go back to a house after you've seen the cracks in the foundation. You'll never stop listening for the walls to shift. Instead, I did something that scared me more than the live stream. I started my own consulting business. Retail operations. Inventory optimization. Staff development. I called it Callaway Solutions, which Amara said sounded very corporate, mom, in a tone that was equal parts teasing and proud. My first client was Celeste at Hargrove Design Studio. She didn't hire me out of pity. She hired me because her company was opening a retail showroom and she needed someone who understood floor operations, vendor logistics, and customer flow. She paid me $8,500 for a 3-month engagement. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was mine. Every dollar earned on my terms. My second client came through Priya Kapoor's article. A midsize home goods chain in Charlotte had read the piece and reached out, asking if I'd audit their store operations across 6 locations. That contract was worth $42,000. I cried when I signed it. Ugly crying again, Wendy's napkin crying, but this time it was different. This time it was relief. Tanya came with me. She's my operations manager now. She took a pay cut to do it, which I told her was insane, and she told me to shut up and send her the onboarding paperwork. Ramon freelances for us on inventory projects. Keisha went back to school for her MBA. I wrote her recommendation letter. Dev moved to Denver for a job at REI and sends me photos of mountains I'll probably never climb but enjoy looking at. As for Kyle, and I say this without satisfaction, just as fact, he lasted 3 months in the corporate training role before resigning. I heard through the grapevine that he moved to Jacksonville and started working at a friend's marketing agency. I don't know if he's happy. I don't know if he learned anything. I hope he did, genuinely, because he's 25 years old and he has time to become someone who earns what he's given. But that's his journey, not mine. Marcus was formally terminated in December. No severance, according to the leaked memo. Greystone cited violations of the company's conflict of interest policy. I don't know where he is now. I don't look him up. Some doors are better left closed. The live stream, as of last month, has been viewed 11.4 million times across all platforms. I've received over 40,000 messages from people sharing their own stories, demotions, stolen credit, nepotism, retaliation. Teachers, nurses, engineers, line cooks, truck drivers. People who were never given a microphone but had been carrying the same weight I carried. Some of those messages are hard to read. Some of them I've read 5 or 6 times because they remind me why I did what I did on the days when I'm not sure. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about going public. It doesn't feel like victory. Not the clean, cinematic kind. It feels like standing naked in a thunderstorm and hoping the lightning hits the right target. Some days I wake up and feel powerful. Other days I wake up and wonder if I ruined a man's career over a grudge I dressed up as justice. The honest answer is somewhere in between, and I've made peace with not knowing exactly where. It's March now. 6 months since the live stream. I'm sitting in a rented office space in Decatur, nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a coffee maker that takes forever, and Callaway Solutions has 7 active clients. Revenue last quarter was $127,000. Not Greystone money, but clean money. Money that doesn't come with a folding table and a smile that expects you to smile back. Amara is finishing her senior year. She got accepted to Georgia State. She wants to study communications, which she says is definitely not because of you, Mom, but she also asked me to help her write her application essay about workplace advocacy, so I have my doubts. Last week, I drove past the Buckhead Greystone. I didn't plan to. I was on my way to a client meeting and the GPS rerouted me for construction. There it was, same glass front, same parking lot, same sign. They'd hired a new manager. I don't know her name. The store looked fine from the outside. Stores usually do. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. But I noticed something as I passed. The Store of the Year banner was gone from the window. The one they'd hung during my second win. It used to be the first thing you saw walking in. Now there was a promotional poster for fall candles in its place. I kept driving. Here's what I want to leave you with, and I mean this specifically, not as a bumper sticker or a motivational poster on a regional director's wall. If you are the person holding everything together at your job, if you are the institutional memory, the fixer, the one who gets the 2 a.m. calls and the folding table instead of the corner office, know your worth in concrete terms. Not feelings. Numbers. Know exactly what you contribute, what would break without you, and what your knowledge is worth on the open market. Write it down. Back it up. Keep it somewhere they can't reach. Because loyalty without leverage isn't loyalty. It's volunteering for your own exploitation. And I say that as someone who volunteered for 10 years before I figured it out. I don't regret the decade I gave Greystone. I regret how long it took me to realize that giving everything to a place that gives you nothing back isn't dedication, it's self-erasure. And I regret the nights I couldn't sleep, and the pasta I couldn't eat, and the graduation I missed, and the version of myself that thought being indispensable meant being valued. Marcus Whitfield told me I should be grateful. Most people in my position would have been let go entirely. He was right about one thing: I was let go. Just not the way he meant. I let go of the fear that kept me quiet. I let go of the loyalty that kept me small. And I let go of the idea that the people above me had earned the right to define my worth. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've ever trained your own replacement, or watched someone's kid get handed what you built, or sat at a folding table wondering how you got there, I want to hear from you. Not because misery loves company, but because silence is how they win. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me what you carried. Tell me what you let go of. And if you're still in it, still sitting in that back row, still smiling when you want to scream, just know that the moment you decide you're done, the whole equation changes. Not easily, not cleanly, but permanently. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And the next time someone tells you to be grateful for being disrespected, remember, you don't owe gratitude to people who owe you an apology. My name is Denise Calloway. I was the best manager Greystone Retail ever had. And I'm just getting started.